The Duke remembered every person in the ballroom except the woman he had promised to marry. Lady Elinor Vale stood beneath 60 watching faces as Tristan Harrow took her younger sister's hand and called Elinor a confused acquaintance. Her father ordered her to remain silent for the family's sake. Elinor did not plead. She placed the key to Greyhaven's account room on the table and watched Tristan initial a document with the private mark he had learned from her proof that his memory was far more selective than he claimed. Before her carriage cleared London, the first estate wages went unpaid. One grain shipment appeared in 2 ledgers at once, and 46 tenant families were placed in danger. Elinor left with a red-spined book no one valued. By the time Greyhaven discovered what she had carried away, forgetting her would cost them far more than a marriage. For 3 breaths, no one in the Ashcombe ballroom moved. The orchestra had stopped between measures, leaving Tristan Harrow's declaration suspended beneath the chandeliers. Lady Elinor Vale watched her younger sister's gloved fingers tighten around the Duke's hand. Lydia looked frightened, but she did not release him. Tristan faced the assembled guests with the grave patience of a man enduring an unreasonable interruption. "I regret that Lady Elinor has mistaken ordinary kindness for an understanding that never existed," he said. A murmur travelled through the room, soft enough to sound polite and sharp enough to wound. Elinor's father stepped beside her before she could answer. Lord Ashcombe did not ask whether Tristan's claim was true. He placed 2 fingers against Elinor's wrist as though restraining a troublesome child. "The physician warned us against distressing His Grace," he said quietly. "He remembers the season, the treaty vote, his horses, and every guest in this room," Elinor replied. Her voice remained level, forcing those nearest her to lean closer rather than turn away. "He remembers Miss Lydia's favourite composer, though they spoke of it only once." Tristan's expression did not change. "Fragments return without order," he said. "Then perhaps you will explain why mine alone have vanished." Her mother's fan snapped shut. "Elinor, enough." That single word carried years of instruction. Enough questions. Enough ambition. Enough insistence that work performed in silence should still belong to the woman who had done it. Lydia stepped forward with tears brightening her eyes. "I never wished to hurt you." Elinor studied her sister's face and found guilt there. But no surprise. That absence hurt more cleanly than Tristan's lie. "You knew before tonight," Elinor said. Lydia glanced toward their mother. Lady Ashcombe answered for her. His Grace woke, believing Lydia was the lady he intended to marry. And no one thought it strange that he remembered the intention but changed the woman. Her father's grip tightened. "You will not turn a medical tragedy into a public spectacle." The public spectacle had already been arranged around her. 60 guests had been invited to witness Tristan's recovery and Lydia's unexpected elevation. The announcement cards waited on a silver tray near the doors. A fresh portrait of Lydia had been placed beside the Greyhaven crest. Even the champagne had been poured before Elinor entered the room. This was not a confusion being managed. It was a conclusion prepared in advance. Tristan reached for a document held by Sir Felix Mordaunt, his financial secretary. The paper bore the heading of a revised marriage settlement. Elinor recognized the wide margin she had insisted upon for estate amendments. She had spent 4 months calculating the protections that would keep Greyhaven from consuming her own inheritance. Now Lydia's name occupied the line where hers had stood. Tristan took the pen Felix offered and marked the lower corner before signing. The movement lasted less than a second. A short downward stroke, followed by 2 narrow dots. Elinor felt every sound in the ballroom recede. Years earlier, She had devised that private mark so Tristan could distinguish final drafts from the copies Felix prepared. No solicitor knew it. No physician had seen it. Tristan had used it only in letters and estate papers reviewed with Elinor. A man who had forgotten her could not remember the mark she had taught him. Tristan looked up and found her watching his hand. For the first time that evening, uncertainty crossed his face. Elinor did not accuse him. An accusation without proof would become another symptom of the madness they had assigned to her. Instead, she crossed to the long table beneath the musicians' gallery. The account room key rested in the pocket sewn inside her glove. She removed it and placed it beside the revised settlement. The small iron key made almost no sound against the polished wood. Everyone heard it. For 12 years. I have balanced Ashcombe's rents when my father's hands were too painful to write, she said. Lord Ashcombe released her wrist. I arranged Greyhaven's winter wages when its steward died. And I corrected the grain contracts your secretary presented with the same cargo listed twice. Felix gave a thin smile. Lady Elinor assisted with copying figures. I created the figures you copied. Her father's face darkened. This is neither the time nor the place. It became the place when you asked witnesses to believe I imagined my own life. She turned to Tristan. He had once praised her calmness because it made difficult matters easier for him. Now he appeared to understand that the same calmness gave him nothing to fight. The room is yours again, Your Grace, she said. Then Greyhaven may discover what else it has forgotten. Lydia caught Elinor's sleeve as she passed. Please do not leave like this. How would you prefer I leave? I want you to understand that none of us chose what happened. Elinor looked at Tristan's uninjured hand resting over the amended settlement. Someone chose every part of this. She freed her sleeve without force. Her mother followed her into the entrance hall, where servants had already gathered beside the stairs. You cannot travel tonight, Lady Ashcombe said. My room is no longer mine, and neither is my future. This is still your family. A family does not require one daughter to disappear, so another may be comfortable. Elinor, Lydia has always been delicate. Then she should not be given a marriage built on a lie. Her mother's face hardened with relief, as if anger were easier to dismiss than grief. You are the elder sister. There it was again. The sentence that had turned surrender into duty since childhood. Elinor drew on her travelling gloves. Yes, she said. I am old enough to stop confusing surrender with love. In the front parlour, she found Mr. Bell waiting beside 2 leather cases. The retired steward had taught her to read rent rolls before anyone thought a young lady might understand them. His silver brows rose when he saw her alone. Did his Grace remember everything useful? Mr. Bell glanced toward the ballroom doors. And you, I remembered where I placed the only complete working ledger. The smaller case contained clothes. The larger one held correspondence, wage tables, warehouse tallies, and a red-spined book wrapped in plain linen. Elinor had moved the original ledger to her aunt's solicitor 3 days after Tristan's accident. She had told herself it was a professional precaution. Now she knew some part of her had recognized danger before her heart permitted the truth. Mr. Bell lowered his voice. Sir Felix asked twice whether you kept private copies. What did you tell him? That a competent accountant always does, despite everything. Elinor almost smiled. Her carriage rolled away before midnight. No member of her family came outside to watch it leave. At Dowry, she stopped at her widowed aunt's townhouse and signed instructions, sealing the red ledger in the solicitor's iron cabinet. She kept only a list of its folio numbers and the brass token from Greyhaven's North Warehouse. The token carried the code N17, a shipment of winter grain reserved against unpaid wages. By noon, Elinor had taken rooms under her own name and written to 3 estates seeking formal employment. She did not write to Tristan. She did not write to Lydia. She wrote once to Mr. Vale, asking him to report only matters affecting workers, tenants, or creditors. His answer arrived 4 days later. Greyhaven's labourers had not been paid. Ashcombe's rent account showed a withdrawal Elinor had never authorised. The North Warehouse claimed shipment N17 had been sent to London. A second ledger showed the same grain pledged to a bank in Newcastle. At the bottom of Mr. Bell's letter, one sentence had been underlined twice. Sir Felix had ordered 46 notices of termination prepared for tenant families before the next quarter day. Elinor read Mr. Bell's letter twice before carrying it to the narrow desk beside her window. The rooms she had rented were modest, but every key belonged to her. No servant entered without knocking. No relative could move her papers, choose her callers, or explain her own decisions on her behalf. That freedom should have felt like triumph. Instead, 46 termination notices lay behind her eyes whenever she tried to rest. The families named in Greyhaven's tenant rolls were not figures to her. She knew which cottage housed 3 generations of Turners and which field Mrs. Dalloway's sons had drained after the spring floods. She knew the bakers depended upon winter carting wages after their western acreage failed. She also knew Tristan had praised the stability of his estate without once asking how it had been achieved. For 3 years, Elinor had moved surplus rent from prosperous quarters into a protected wage reserve. She had negotiated later payment dates with grain merchants when harvest prices fell. She had prevented Greyhaven from selling its emergency stores during 2 profitable summers, because profit meant little if labourers starved in January. Every instruction had carried Tristan's signature. Every solution had been remembered as his judgment. Now that she was gone, the work had not merely slowed. Someone had begun dismantling it. Elinor opened a clean notebook and drew 3 columns. The first held the known balance of the winter wage fund. The second held the withdrawal reported by Mr. Bell. The third held the value of shipment N17. The figures should have supported one another. Instead, the same sum appeared to have been removed from cash reserves and replaced on paper by grain that no longer existed in the North Warehouse. That was not careless management. It was a bridge built across an empty account. A knock sounded shortly after 2. Her landlady entered with a card held between 2 fingers. The black lettering read Gabriel Arden, Duke of Westbridge. Elinor had met him only twice in crowded rooms. Both times, Tristan had described him as a man who treated commerce as warfare and courtesy as camouflage. His Grace says the matter concerns a grain contract, the landlady said. Then show him up. Gabriel entered without the entourage expected of his rank. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed with the severe precision of a man who disliked wasting movement. His dark coat was still marked with rain at the cuffs. His gaze moved from Elinor to the open columns on her desk. "I was told you had withdrawn from society," he said. "I withdrew from my family's ballroom. That is not how the story is being repeated. I have no control over people who find accuracy less entertaining than scandal." A brief change touched his expression. It might have been approval, though his voice remained cool. "Greyhaven pledged 800 quarters of wheat to my Riverside warehouse. How much arrived?" 460. "And how much did your clerk sign for all 800? Elinor closed the notebook. Then your clerk was either bribed or shown tokens for grain stored elsewhere. Gabriel studied her more carefully. You reached that conclusion quickly. I reached it 4 days before your visit. She handed him Mr. Bell's letter, but kept her fingers over the final paragraph. Gabriel read the lines concerning N17. Why would Greyhaven pledge the same grain twice, to conceal a missing wage fund until the marriage settlement released Lydia's dowry? His eyes lifted. You believe the marriage was arranged to repair the estate. I believe money explains urgency more reliably than memory loss. That is not proof. No. Elinor withdrew the brass token from her writing case. Its surface had darkened with use. But the stamped code remained clear. N17 was assigned to the North Warehouse Reserve. Gabriel turned it beneath the window light. Any blacksmith could stamp a piece of brass. Not with that border. A ring of tiny diagonal cuts surrounded the number. Elinor explained that she had introduced the pattern after warehouse clerks began exchanging tally pieces between separate estates. North Warehouse tokens carried diagonal borders. River Warehouse tokens carried dots. London delivery tokens carried a single notch. The system was inexpensive, visible, and difficult to confuse during hurried loading. Who approved it? Gabriel asked. I did. Under whose authority? Tristan's. Once it succeeded, Gabriel set the token down. The small sound seemed louder than it should have been. You understand that helping me damage Greyhaven would be interpreted as revenge. Helping you. You have brought evidence that my rival may have committed fraud. I brought evidence that labourers have not been paid. Greyhaven's fall would injure Tristan Harrow. His tenants would fall first. Gabriel walked to the cold fireplace and turned back. You expect me to believe you have no interest in humiliating the man who discarded you. I expect nothing from you. Her answer stopped him. Elinor gathered her columns and tied them with a narrow cord. You came because your warehouse is short 340 quarters of wheat. You need someone who understands the coding system and the original contracts. That does not make our interests the same. What are your interests? Lady Elinor, to find the grain, restore the wage reserve, and prevent those notices from being served. And Tristan may live with whatever remains after the truth is paid for. Gabriel's silence lasted several seconds. Then he removed a folded document from inside his coat. It was a copy of the delivery certificate signed at Westbridge's Riverside warehouse. Elinor examined the date. Wait. Klerksname. And 3 token codes listed in the margin. The first 2 codes belong to London deliveries. The third read, N17. Your clerk saw this token, she asked. He recorded the number. That is not what I asked. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. I will speak to him. Do so before Sir Felix learns you are asking. You assume Mordaunt is involved. He controlled the account room, the couriers, and Tristan's seal. That gives him access. Not motive. The termination notices give him a deadline. Gabriel took back the certificate. You have a conclusion for every question. I have questions for every conclusion. For the first time. He smiled. It vanished almost at once. My carriage is downstairs. I am not going to Greyhaven. I did not ask you to. You intended to. I intended to offer access to my warehouse. Full access to the delivery court. Manifests and loading records. Bank drafts, no. Correspondence with Greyhaven, no. Then you are asking me to confirm the mistake you have already found while keeping the cause beyond reach. I am limiting the damage if your motives are not what you claim. Elinor picked up the brass token. and I am declining to lend my name to an inspection designed to protect you alone." Gabriel's jaw tightened. 340 quarters are missing. Then decide whether your suspicion of me is worth more than finding them. He left without agreeing. By sunset, Elinor assumed the conversation had ended. At 8 the following morning, Gabriel's carriage returned with a written authorization granting her access to the warehouse. Manifests, loading court, and clerk interviews. The bank drafts and private correspondence remained excluded. Elinor accepted because the labourers could not eat her pride. The riverside warehouse smelled of damp wood, rope, and old grain. Gabriel's chief clerk, Mr. Sayer, waited beside 4 ledgers with sweat gathering at his temples despite the cold. He insisted that N17 had arrived in 3 covered wagons on the 9th. Elinor asked which gate they had used. "The east gate." "Who weighed them, Mr. Coates?" "Who unlocked the receiving bay? I did." "And where is the token now, Mr.?" Sayer looked toward Gabriel. "The driver took it." "Drivers surrender, reserve tokens upon delivery." Perhaps the rule was overlooked. Elinor opened the loading ledger. The page for the 9th showed 8 wagons arriving between noon and 4. 3 were assigned to Greyhaven. Each supposedly carried more wheat than the axle limits permitted on the rain-softened road. She asked for the stable book. Gabriel's steward brought it reluctantly. No Greyhaven horses had been fed, watered, or rested that day. Elinor then examined the East Gate account. The gatekeeper had recorded a broken hinge from sunrise until the following morning. No wagon could have passed through it. "Mr.?" Sayer began explaining too quickly. Elinor did not interrupt. When he finished, she asked him to repeat the token code. N17, he said. "Describe its border." His face emptied. Gabriel stepped closer. "You recorded the token." "Mr." Sayer swallowed. "I was shown a written list." "By whom?" Elinor asked. Before he could answer, a warehouse boy entered, carrying a message that had arrived by hired courier. The seal belonged to Greyhaven. The note ordered Gabriel's clerks to destroy all duplicate delivery slips because Lady Elinor Vale had falsified the original accounts before leaving Ashcombe. Elinor read the accusation, then looked at the date beneath it. The order had been written the previous evening. Only Gabriel, Elinor, and the frightened clerk had known the inspection concerned duplicate slips. Someone had sent word to Sir Felix before Gabriel's carriage returned from her rooms. Gabriel read the Greyhaven order a second time, while Mr. Sayer stared at the floor. No one outside this warehouse knew what Lady Elinor intended to examine. Gabriel said, "Mr." Sayer's lips trembled. "I mentioned the duplicate slips to no one." "Your Grace." Elinor folded the order along its original crease. The courier knew. Gabriel looked toward the warehouse boy. The boy immediately shook his head. He gave me the note at the south door. "Sir," then rode away. "What did he look like?" Elinor asked. "Grey coat, brown hat, scar near his chin." "Which hand held the reins?" The boy hesitated. "His right." "And which hand gave you the letter his right as well?" Elinor turned the paper over. The wax had been pressed while still too hot, leaving a shallow ridge along one side of the Greyhaven seal. A hired courier riding hard would not carry a freshly sealed order in the same hand as his reins without bending or smearing it. Gabriel examined the unmarked paper. "You think the message was prepared nearby?" "I think the man waited close enough to receive information." seal the order, and deliver it before we finished our inspection. Mr. Sayer's breathing grew louder. Gabriel faced him. Who left the warehouse after my carriage arrived yesterday? No clerk left before dusk. That was not my question. The chief clerk looked toward the loading court. Mr. Pike carried the afternoon totals to the counting office. Eleanor remembered the thin clerk, who had unlocked the manifest room, and avoided looking at the brass token. How long was he gone? She asked. Nearly an hour. Gabriel ordered a steward to bring Pike at once. The steward returned alone. Pike had taken his coat, emptied his desk, and left through the river gate before breakfast. Gabriel's expression hardened. You believed the leak came from Greyhaven, Eleanor said. It appears Greyhaven placed it inside my own warehouse. Felix did not need to place anyone here if he found someone already afraid of losing his position. Gabriel glanced at Mr. Say you. The clerk's shoulders folded inward. Eleanor set the false delivery certificate beside the Greyhaven order. One man accepted grain he never saw. Another carried information to Felix. And someone altered your loading records after the gate hinge broke. Gabriel's gaze moved between the documents. You are certain the page was altered. The ink is the same color. But the pressure is not. She opened the loading ledger and pointed to the entries for the 9th. The ordinary entries leaned slightly right and left, faint impressions on the following page. The Greyhaven wagons had been written upright with heavier downward strokes. The clerk who usually kept this book wrote quickly while standing at the gate desk. Eleanor said. The false entries were written later by someone seated with time to imitate his hand. Gabriel summoned the gatekeeper. The man identified every true entry without difficulty and denied writing the 3 Greyhaven lines. He also remembered Pike borrowing the ledger on the morning after the broken hinge was repaired. Gabriel dismissed the gatekeeper, then ordered every warehouse door locked. No paper leaves this building until I have examined it. By then, the useful papers may already be gone, Eleanor said. You believe Pike carried them to Felix. I believe Felix would not risk a warning merely to protect 3 false lines. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. What else is he protecting? The bank drafts you refused to show me. Silence gathered between them. His steward looked away. Gabriel had granted her enough access to confirm his loss, but not enough to trace the mechanism that created it. His caution had preserved the exact darkness Felix needed. The correspondence is private, Gabriel said. So were my marriage arrangements until they were rewritten before an audience. That is not an argument for unrestricted access to my accounts. No. It is an argument that powerful men call information private when they fear what a woman may understand from it. Mr. Sayer glanced at Gabriel and immediately lowered his eyes again. Gabriel's voice cooled. You are standing in my warehouse under my protection. I am standing here because 46 families are about to lose theirs. You continue to treat my caution as vanity. I treat it as a choice with consequences. His jaw tightened. But he did not interrupt. You suspected I wanted revenge. Eleanor continued. Because of that suspicion, you allowed Pike another night to remove documents. If I had trusted you without question, and you had deceived me, hundreds of my own tenants might have paid the price. Then examine my evidence. I have. No, Your Grace. You examined the parts that threatened you least. The words struck more deeply because she did not raise her voice. Gabriel walked to the river doors and looked through the glass panels at the barges below. Eleanor waited. She had learned long ago that silence forced powerful men to hear the full weight of what had been said. At last, He turned. You will have the bank drafts, correspondence, and payment instructions exchanged with Greyhaven for the past 18 months, without redactions, and your clerks will answer to me during the review. They will answer questions relevant to the missing grain. I will decide what is relevant until we understand how it disappeared. Gabriel held her gaze. Agreed. The steward opened the private counting room shortly before noon. 3 iron boxes held the correspondence between Westbridge and Greyhaven. Elinor began with the drafts rather than the letters. Amounts could be disguised by language, but dates remained less obedient. She arranged every payment connected to N17 across the long table. One draft paid Greyhaven for the full shipment. A second transferred a smaller amount to Mordaunt Commercial Holdings for emergency carriage hire. A third compensated a Newcastle warehouse for storing the same grain during the same week. Gabriel leaned over the documents. Felix charged 3 estates for 1 shipment. He charged them for the appearance of 1 shipment. What is the distinction? Grain leaves evidence even when papers lie. She listed wagon capacity, horses, toll payments, meals, stable fees, and unloading labour. None appeared in numbers sufficient to move 800 quarters. The cargo never travelled. She said, Then where is it? That depends upon whether it existed when the first pledge was signed. Gabriel looked at the brass token on the table. You believe N17 was invented? No. Elinor turned the token between her fingers. The diagonal border is genuine. And I remember assigning the code. Then it existed. It existed 3 months ago. She found a Greyhaven letter authorizing the North Warehouse Reserve to be moved after signs of damp were reported. The letter carried Tristan's signature and the short private mark he had used in the ballroom. Its date was 5 days after his supposed loss of memory. Gabriel read the instruction twice. He remembered your accounting mark. He remembered more than that. The letter directed Sir Felix to transfer Elinor's settlement calculations into Lydia's account before the 9th. Gabriel's face became still. You were right about the marriage. I was right that money created the urgency. That is enough to expose Harrow. It is enough to expose a contradiction. She removed the letter from his hand and placed it back on the table. Tristan can claim Felix prepared the instruction and placed the mark there. You taught him the mark. I can say so. And your testimony will be called jealousy. Gabriel understood at once. A private truth spoken by a disgraced woman would be treated as emotion unless supported by independent proof. Elinor needed the original draft, the courier record, or a witness who had seen Tristan write it. She searched the correspondence box for the preceding folio. The numbered sequence jumped from 42 to 44. Folio 43 had been removed cleanly from the binding thread. Gabriel called for Pike's desk to be searched. Inside its lowest drawer, they found a scrap of red thread, 3 sovereigns wrapped in Greyhaven stationery, and a list of Elinor's recent callers. Her name appeared beside Gabriel's on every day since she had taken rooms. At the bottom, Pike had written one final instruction. If Lady Elinor gains access to the private drafts, report immediately and prepare the theft complaint. Gabriel read the line with visible disgust. He intended to accuse you before you found the missing folio. He still does. A carriage rattled into the loading court. 2 constables stepped down with a magistrate's clerk between them. The clerk carried a warrant bearing Greyhaven's seal. Lady Elinor Vale was accused of stealing estate papers, altering delivery records, and conspiring with the Duke of Westbridge to destroy her sister's marriage. The magistrate's clerk entered the counting room, as though the accusation had already become a verdict. He read Elinor's name from the warrant, then asked Gabriel to surrender every Greyhaven document in his possession. Gabriel remained between the clerk and the long table. "These papers concern a fraud committed against Westbridge," he said. "They concern property allegedly taken from Greyhaven by Lady Elinor Vale." Elinor stepped around Gabriel before his protection could become another form of control. "You may search my cases and the rooms I have used here," she said. "You may list every item you remove. And Mr. Arden's solicitor will witness the seal placed upon it." The clerk frowned at the conditions. "You are in no position to direct the search. I am in precisely the position that requires a proper record." One constable opened her document case while the other searched the adjoining office. Elinor watched every paper change hands. The loading tables were hers, created that morning from Westbridge records. The brass token belonged to Greyhaven. But Mr. Bell had given it to her before she left Ashcombe. The copied delivery certificate had come from Gabriel. Nothing connected her to the missing folio. Then the second constable returned, carrying a red-spined ledger. He said he had found it beneath Elinor's travelling cloak in the private office. Gabriel looked at her. Elinor did not touch the book. "My working ledger is held in an iron cabinet at my aunt's solicitor's office," she said. The magistrate's clerk placed the red book on the table. Its cover resembled hers, though the cloth was brighter and the corners showed no wear. Inside, several pages carried columns in a careful imitation of Elinor's hand. The false entries suggested that she had moved Greyhaven grain into a private account 3 weeks before Tristan's accident. Mr. Sayer stared at the book in horror. Gabriel asked when the private office had last been locked. The steward admitted that Mr. Pike had carried the key until the previous evening. The clerk ignored him and turned another page. "This appears sufficient to justify the complaint. It appears sufficient because it was designed to be found," Elinor said. She pointed without touching. "My real ledger opens flat at the wage accounts because I use those pages every week. This spine has never been broken." She asked the clerk to hold the book beneath the window. The paper bore a merchant's watermark used by a London stationer only since the beginning of the year. Several entries were dated 18 months earlier. The constables exchanged a glance. The magistrate's clerk closed the ledger. "That question can be considered at the hearing," a voice answered from the doorway. "There need be no dispute over a book that has already caused this family enough harm." Sir Felix Mordaunt entered with Lord Ashcombe and Tristan behind him. Lydia was not present. Tristan's left arm rested in a sling he no longer needed, while his expression carried the solemn injury of a man forced to confront betrayal. He looked directly at Elinor. For one reckless instant, she wondered whether he would forget to pretend he did not know her. Then his gaze passed over her with practised uncertainty. "Is that the lady who altered my accounts?" he asked. Felix approached the table. "She is, Your Grace." Gabriel blocked his hand before he could take the ledger. "The paper is false. The dates are impossible. And your paid clerk placed it in the room." Felix smiled with restrained sorrow. "You defend her passionately. I defend evidence from men who prefer scandal to examination." Lord Ashcombe ordered Elinor to return home before the matter became irreparable. She asked whether he had read the 46 termination notices prepared under his seal. His face changed. But Felix answered first. "Temporary measures are required when an estate has been damaged by theft. The notices were prepared before anyone accused me." Felix's smile disappeared. The magistrate's clerk began wrapping the false ledger in cloth. Felix seized a candle from the wall bracket and tipped its flame against the exposed page edges. Fire moved through the dry paper before anyone understood his intention. Gabriel struck the book from his hands, but it landed open upon the stone hearth. The false columns blackened and curled inward. The constables stamped at the flames until only the damp cover and several scorched leaves remained. The magistrate's clerk demanded an explanation. Felix looked shaken for exactly the length of time required to make the destruction appear impulsive. I feared His Grace would be further distressed by seeing private family records used against him. You destroyed evidence under a magistrate's warrant, Gabriel said. I destroyed a forgery, created to ruin Greyhaven. Elinor watched ash gather around the red spine. Felix believed he had removed the object that could be examined. Instead, he had confirmed that examination frightened him. She asked the clerk to record who had touched the book, where it had been found, and who had burned it. Felix turned toward her. You speak as though records can save you. They frighten you enough to burn. Tristan finally abandoned his performance of confusion. His eyes sharpened with the old warning. Elinor remembered from arguments over his investments. You should have accepted what was offered, and left my affairs alone. The room became silent. Lord Ashcombe looked at him. Gabriel did not move. Elinor heard the admission inside the sentence, but Tristan seemed to realize it too late. What was offered, she asked. His expression closed. A peaceful separation from an imagined attachment. No, Elinor stepped nearer the scorched ledger. You offered silence in exchange for humiliation. And now you are learning that silence was the only part of your estate still solvent. The magistrate's clerk ordered Elinor to appear before the county hearing in 3 days. Until then, she was forbidden to remove any Greyhaven property from London. Elinor agreed, because the genuine ledger had already been sealed beyond Felix's reach. Before the officials departed, a Westbridge messenger arrived from the North Road. He carried reports from Greyhaven Village, Ashcombe's bank, and the riverside warehouses. The bank had frozen both estates' wage accounts after receiving competing claims against the same grain reserve. Felix's agents had served the first 12 termination notices that morning. The remaining 34 would be delivered within 48 hours. 2 merchant houses had demanded immediate repayment. Unless someone restored the missing collateral, the creditors would petition to seize the warehouses and divide the tenant lands for sale. Gabriel read the figures beside the cold hearth. I can cover the wages and purchase the outstanding notes before the hearing, he said. Lord Ashcombe stared at him with sudden hope. Felix did not object. Elinor understood why. What security would Westbridge receive? She asked. Gabriel hesitated. The river lands and first right of purchase if Greyhaven defaults. The arrangement would keep families inside their cottages for several weeks. It would also move the same land from one powerful man's control to another while leaving the fraudulent debt intact. Gabriel's offer was generous only if one ignored what he would own when generosity ended. You came to stop Felix from buying Greyhaven cheaply, Elinor said. I came to prevent collapse. By purchasing the right to inherit it, I would protect the tenants. For how long? As long as the land remained profitable. The answer was honest. That made it no less dangerous. Elinor gathered the surviving scraps of the burned ledger into an evidence cloth. I will not use 46 families as the price of choosing which duke wins. Gabriel's voice lowered. Without immediate money, the wages remain frozen. Then we prove why they were frozen. In 3 days, Felix moved the hearing forward because 3 days are all he believes we have. Outside, the warehouse bell rang as labourers gathered for wages that could not be paid. A second messenger entered before the first had caught his breath. He carried a sealed contract from the Widows' Agricultural Trust in Bath. offering Lady Elinor Vale independent employment, a private residence, and a salary beginning the following Monday. Elinor read the bath contract while the warehouse bell continued tolling beyond the walls. The Widows' Agricultural Trust offered more than respectable employment. It offered a salary paid directly into an account bearing her name, a furnished house near the Trust's demonstration farms, and authority to approve every agricultural purchase under £500. No father, husband, or trustee would be required to countersign her work. She could leave London the following morning and begin before Greyhaven's creditors gathered. Lord Ashcombe glanced over her shoulder and dismissed the document with a tired movement. You cannot seriously consider abandoning your family during a crisis. The position was offered because I know how to prevent crises like this one. You would become an employee. I have been an employee for 12 years. Her father stiffened. You were helping your household, without wages, title, credit, or the right to refuse. Felix watched the exchange from beside Tristan, calculating whether Elinor's departure would serve him. His satisfaction told her more clearly than any plea that leaving was the safest choice for herself. It also told her how much he feared what she might still prove. Lord Ashcombe lowered his voice. If you go now, society will say you fled because the accusation was true. Society announced my guilt before the warrant arrived. Your sister's future depends upon how this is handled. My sister accepted a future built from mine. Lydia appeared in the warehouse doorway, as if Elinor's words had summoned her. She wore a pale blue travelling dress, and no jewellery except Tristan's engagement ring. The colour had left her face. "May I speak with Elinor alone?" she asked. Tristan moved toward her. "You should not be here." Lydia stepped away from his hand. "I have obeyed enough instructions for 1 week." Elinor led her into the small office where the false ledger had been planted. The room still smelled of damp wool and burned paper. Lydia closed the door but remained beside it. "I did not know he was pretending at first," she said. Elinor waited. "I believed the physician, and Mother said his memories might return in fragments. When did you learn otherwise the night before the announcement?" The answer landed without surprise. Lydia pressed her fingers together. "I heard him ask Felix whether your settlement calculations had been transferred into mine, and you entered the ballroom the next evening. Mother said the arrangement could no longer be stopped without destroying us all. Us, our family, Greyhaven, the tenants, everyone. Felix used the tenants to purchase your silence." Lydia's eyes filled. "I thought my dowry would save them. It was used to hide the theft that endangered them. I know that now." Elinor looked at the ring on her sister's hand. "Will you say what you heard at the hearing?" Lydia recoiled. "If I speak publicly, Tristan will deny it. He may. Mother will call me unstable. She may. My marriage will be ruined." Elinor did not soften the truth. "Your marriage was designed as a financial instrument before it became a ceremony." Lydia covered the ring with her other hand. "You make leaving sound simple. It is not simple." Elinor lifted the bath contract. "It is merely possible." Lydia looked at the document and then at Elinor. "Are you truly going?" "Yes." "What will happen to us?" "You will decide whether comfort purchased with a lie is worth its price." Lydia's mouth trembled. "You always knew what to do." "No." Elinor opened the door. "I learned to make decisions because everyone else expected me to carry their consequences." Gabriel waited in the counting room after the Ashcombe party departed. The magistrate's clerk had taken the burned ledger under seal, and the constables had gone with him. Only the bath contract and the unpaid wage reports remained on the table. Gabriel placed a ring of keys beside Elinor's hand. They opened the private correspondence room, the lower archive, and every Westbridge warehouse office. You should have offered them yesterday. I should have. His answer held no defence. Elinor looked at him more carefully. Gabriel had removed his coat and loosened the severe knot of his neckcloth. For the first time, he appeared less like a duke defending an estate, and more like a man forced to measure the cost of his own judgment. I believed your anger made you dangerous, he said. My anger was never the danger. No. He glanced toward the place where the false book had burned. My need to control what you could examine gave Felix time to plant evidence. Remove a folio and prepare a warrant. Elinor waited for the apology to become an excuse. It did not. I was wrong, Gabriel said. The failure was mine, and the consequences were yours, partly mine. She touched Mr. Bell's letter. The unpaid workers bear more of them. Gabriel nodded. I will pay the missing wages as an advance without attaching the Riverlands as security. That protects them for 1 quarter. It buys time. And what will you demand in return? Nothing from Greyhaven. No purchase right. No purchase right. The concession cost him more than money. Greyhaven's river access would have strengthened every Westbridge contract in the north. Abandoning the claim meant losing the commercial victory he had pursued for years. Why? Elinor asked. Because you were correct. That has not troubled powerful men before. A faint, humorless smile crossed his face. You said the tenants should not become property in a contest between 2 dukes. And now I find I cannot repeat Tristan's mistake while claiming to oppose him. Elinor folded the bath contract and placed it inside her case. Gabriel's gaze followed the movement. You intend to accept? I already have. The hearing is in 3 days. My solicitor can deliver the sealed ledger if the magistrate compels it. He cannot explain your coding system. Mr. Bell can explain enough to delay the sale, not enough to expose Felix. Elinor closed the case. That is no longer my responsibility. The words hurt, but they were true. Responsibility taken without authority had consumed half her life. Gabriel did not ask her to sacrifice another part of it. He returned the warehouse token and stepped away from the door. My carriage will take you to your rooms. I can hire one. The streets outside are crowded with reporters who received Felix's version before the warrant was served. I will not hide beneath your crest. Then use an unmarked carriage. She considered the offer and accepted because refusing practical help would not make her more independent. At her rooms, Gabriel remained beside the carriage while the landlady supervised the loading of 2 cases. He handed Elinor a sealed letter. This confirms that Westbridge examined your calculations and found them accurate. You wrote it before knowing whether I would stay. I wrote it because the truth should not depend upon whether you favour me. The sentence shifted something between them. But Elinor refused to name it. She placed the letter with her contract. Gabriel then gave the driver instructions for fresh horses at every authorised stop to Bath. He did not ask where she would sleep. He did not ask her to write. He did not touch her hand. You will be free of London before Felix can seek another warrant, he said. And the tenants, the wages will be delivered tomorrow morning. Without liens, without liens. Elinor stepped into the carriage. Gabriel closed the door and stood back. For the first time since Tristan's false accident, a powerful man allowed her to leave without punishment. Pursuit. Or accusation. The freedom felt unfamiliar enough to frighten her. By sunrise, London had disappeared behind winter fields. Elinor slept through the first change of horses and woke near Reading with Gabriel's reference letter beneath her glove. At the second posting house, a boy called her name before the driver finished checking the harness. He carried a packet marked with Mr. Bell's shaking hand. Inside was a copy of the full termination list. 46 family names filled 2 pages. Beside 12 of them, Felix had marked cottages for immediate clearance. A second note reported that the creditor's hearing had been moved from 3 days away to the following afternoon. Felix had also ordered the north warehouse emptied before dawn. Elinor turned to the final page. Mr. Bell had copied a line found in an old dispatch register before Greyhaven's clerk locked him out. The register showed that Folio 43 had been carried from Tristan to Felix 5 days after the Duke claimed he no longer remembered Elinor. The courier who delivered it was still employed at Ashcombe. Elinor looked through the posting-house window at the western road leading toward Bath. A private house waited there. A salary waited there. A life no one could take from her waited there. Behind her, 46 families were about to lose the only road they had. She folded the contract, placed it safely inside her case, and called to the driver. "We are not continuing west." He stared at her from the carriage step. "Where are we going?" "Milady." Elinor held the termination list in one hand and the brass token in the other. "Back to Ashcombe. But this time they will hear my conditions before they hear my evidence." Elinor reached Ashcombe shortly after nightfall and found the entrance court crowded with creditor carriages. The hearing had not begun, but Sir Felix had already filled the house with men who expected Greyhaven to fail. Mr. Bell waited inside the servants' passage with his coat buttoned incorrectly and one hand trembling around a packet of dispatch records. "They dismissed me before noon," he said. "Did they search you?" "They searched my case. And the copied register, I placed it beneath the lining of my hat." Elinor took the folded sheet and checked the date against the number of the missing folio. The courier entry confirmed that Tristan had sent a sealed account order to Felix 5 days after claiming to have forgotten every financial arrangement connected to her. It supported her accusation. But a copied line could still be dismissed as the work of a loyal former steward. "Where is the courier?" she asked. "In the east stable. Does Felix know you found him?" "Not yet." "Then we keep it that way." Gabriel entered through the side door with 2 solicitors and 4 Westbridge men who carried no weapons beyond walking sticks. He stopped when he saw Elinor. "I was told your carriage continued toward Bath." It did not. His gaze moved to the termination list in her hand. "You came back for the tenants." "I came back because Felix used my work to make his theft appear lawful." Gabriel accepted the correction without argument. "What are your conditions?" "Elinor will present the evidence." Her father's voice came from the corridor. Lord Ashcombe approached with Tristan beside him, and Lydia several steps behind. "You will not turn this house into a stage for personal revenge," Lord Ashcombe said. Elinor handed Gabriel the termination list but kept the dispatch copy. "My first condition is that no creditor agreement may remove a tenant before the fraud is examined." Her father's face hardened. "You do not possess the authority to impose terms. Then you do not possess my evidence." Tristan stepped forward. "You stole Greyhaven property." "My working ledger was created by me, maintained by me, and sealed with a solicitor before your complaint was filed. You admit keeping private records. I admit doing the work you claimed as your own." Felix entered from the great hall before Tristan could answer. He looked disappointed rather than surprised to see her. "I had hoped Lady Elinor would choose peace. You moved the hearing because you feared time more than scandal. Felix smiled. The creditors moved it. Using notices your clerk prepared before the missing grain was discovered. Several men in the corridor turned toward him. Felix's expression did not shift. An estate secretary prepares for every possibility. So does an accountant. Elinor Gabriel. My second condition is that Mr. Bell, the Ashcombe courier, the North warehouse keeper, and Mr. Sayer remain under independent protection until they testify. Gabriel nodded. Westbridge will house them separately, and my solicitor will record every transfer. My third condition is that no one touches the original ledger except me until the authentication is complete. Lord Ashcombe looked toward the case beside her. You brought it into this house? No. Felix's eyes flicked toward the windows. That single movement confirmed he still expected the book to arrive by road. The original remains in my solicitor's iron cabinet. Elinor said, A sealed copy is being delivered to 3 trustees by separate couriers. Felix's calm returned too slowly. Gabriel looked at her with quiet understanding. You divided the risk. I learned what happens when one powerful man controls every door. Tristan heard the rebuke but pretended not to. He turned to Lydia. You should retire. No, Lydia said. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the corridor. Tristan stared at her. Lydia removed his engagement ring and held it at her side. I heard you ask Felix to transfer Elinor's settlement figures into mine before the announcement. Lord Ashcombe closed his eyes. Felix spoke before Tristan could react. Lady Lydia misunderstood a conversation about revised family provisions. I understood her name. Lydia looked at Elinor rather than Tristan. I understood the date. And I understood that he remembered enough to fear what she had written. Elinor did not move to comfort her. Lydia's statement mattered, because she had chosen to give it while still afraid. Gabriel instructed one solicitor to record her words, and the other to escort her away from Tristan's reach. Tristan's face flushed. She is my intended wife. She is an adult witness who is asked not to remain beside you. Elinor said, You do not decide where she stands. For once. Lydia did not wait for permission. She crossed the corridor and joined Mr. Bell. The first part of Elinor's chosen return was complete. The people Felix had isolated were beginning to stand together. Gabriel led Elinor into the library, where the trustees waited around a long walnut table. The North warehouse keeper arrived through the garden entrance with 2 ledgers wrapped in oilcloth. Mr. Sayer followed under the supervision of a Westbridge solicitor. The Ashcombe courier was brought from the stable and placed in a separate room until his statement could be taken. Elinor arranged each witness so no one could hear the other's account before speaking. Felix had built his scheme through controlled information. She would dismantle it through independent agreement. The warehouse keeper testified that N17 had remained in the North Reserve until Sir Felix ordered it removed after midnight. He had refused to release the grain because the token had not been surrendered. The following morning, Felix produced a written instruction bearing Tristan's signature. Where is that instruction now? Elinor asked. In the lower ledger. He opened the oilcloth bundle. The binding thread had been cut and replaced across 3 folios. Elinor compared the paper edges. The original pages carried a faint blue line from the mill's drying rack. The replacement pages did not. One replacement sheet also bore a watermark, introduced only that spring, although its entry was dated the previous autumn. Mr. Bell confirmed the older paper stock. Mr. Sayer confirmed that Pike had paid him to record N17 without seeing a wagon. The courier then identified Tristan as the man who had personally handed him Folio 43 after the supposed accident. He remembered because Tristan had dismissed a footman and sealed the packet himself. Elinor placed copies of the 3 accounts side by side. No single witness proved the fraud. Together, they established access, timing, alteration, and custody. A solicitor entered carrying a narrow iron dispatch box sealed with dark green wax. Elinor inspected the seal before accepting the key. Inside lay the red-spined working ledger, exactly as she had left it. The worn cover opened naturally at the winter wage accounts. Her early pages matched Mr. Bell's paper stock. Her code numbers matched the warehouse keeper's tokens. Her draft references matched Westbridge's bank records. Near the centre, she found the instruction copied from Tristan's hand after his accident. Move Lady E. Vale's settlement figures to Lydia's account before the 9th. Below it stood the private mark Tristan had used in the ballroom. Gabriel read the line in silence. This proves he remembered the settlement, he said. It proves more than memory. Elinor turned 3 pages forward. The same sequence connected Lydia's dowry transfer to Mordaunt Commercial Holdings, the company positioned to purchase the Riverlands after foreclosure. Felix had hidden the larger theft inside Tristan's smaller betrayal. Tristan had believed he was replacing one bride to save his estate. Felix had used that replacement to strip the estate for himself. A bell rang from the great hall. The creditors had assembled early. Elinor closed the ledger, but did not surrender it. "Let Felix accuse me first," she said. Gabriel looked toward the doors. "You intend to make him commit to a version of events. I intend to ask about a number he cannot know unless he handled grain he swore he never saw." She placed the brass token inside her glove and lifted the ledger against her chest. "When he answers, no title in that room will be able to return the truth to silence." The great hall had once been used to announce Elinor's engagement to Tristan. Now 2 long tables divided the room between creditors and trustees, while tenants crowded the rear beneath portraits of men who had never learned their names. Sir Felix stood beside the Ashcombe seal with the confidence of a man who believed paperwork had already decided the outcome. Tristan occupied the central chair. Lord Ashcombe sat at his right. Pale and rigid, Gabriel remained behind the trustees rather than beside Elinor. He had promised not to speak for her, and he kept that promise even when every face turned toward her entrance. Elinor carried the red-spined ledger against her chest. "Mr. Bell, Lydia, the warehouse keeper, and the 3 clerks entered separately under the solicitor's protection. Felix watched them take their assigned seats. His eyes rested longest on Lydia. The presiding trustee called the hearing to order and asked Felix to explain why Greyhaven could not meet its obligations. Felix rose with a prepared statement. He described failed harvests, unexpected transport costs, and damage caused by confidential records, allegedly removed by Lady Elinor Vale. He said she had manipulated accounts after Tristan ended an attachment she had misunderstood. He claimed Gabriel had encouraged her because Westbridge wished to weaken its commercial rival. The explanation was elegant. It turned theft into misfortune, betrayal into feminine resentment, and Felix into the loyal servant attempting to save 2 estates from scandal. When he finished, several creditors nodded. Elinor waited until the final whisper faded. "Sir Felix," she said, "when did you first learn shipment? N17 was missing." He glanced at the trustees. "After Westbridge questioned its delivery certificate." "On what date? The 12th. That answer is recorded. Every relevant communication has been provided." Elinor opened the red ledger, but did not yet reveal its central pages. Did you visit the North Warehouse before the 12th? No. Did you inspect its reserve tokens? No. Did you receive a report describing their physical design? Felix smiled faintly. I had no reason to study decorative pieces of brass. They are not decorative. Then I defer to your superior interest in trivial objects. A few men near Tristan laughed. Elinor removed the token from her glove and placed it on the table. The small disc caught the chandelier light. Please read the code. Felix did not approach. N17. That number has been mentioned repeatedly. Describe the border. He hesitated for less than a second. Diagonal cuts. No one laughed this time. The warehouse keeper leaned forward. Gabriel's solicitor immediately wrote down the answer. Elinor left the token where every creditor could see it. The border pattern was never entered in the official accounts. She said, It does not appear on the delivery certificate. The bank drafts, or the copied correspondence. Felix's expression tightened. You displayed the object at Westbridge. To 3 men. Then one of them described it. Mr. Sayer believed the border was dotted until this morning. Mr. Sayer confirmed it from his protected seat. The warehouse boy never touched the token. The boy confirmed that as well. Mr. Pike fled before the inspection was complete and has not been found. Elinor turned back to Felix. You knew the border because you handled N17 or received a private report from someone who did. Felix folded his hands. Even if that were true, familiarity with a warehouse token proves no fraud. No. Elinor's voice remained calm. It proves your testimony began with a lie. The presiding trustee ordered Felix to answer directly. Felix claimed he might have seen the token months earlier and forgotten. Elinor asked whether his memory failed only when accuracy threatened him. Tristan shifted sharply in his chair. The words had reached him before the room understood why. Elinor opened the North Warehouse ledger. She showed the original drying line in the older paper, then the clean replacement sheets cut into the binding. Mr. Bell explained when the paper mill changed its stock. The warehouse keeper identified the pages Sir Felix had ordered him to use after midnight. A stationer's invoice confirmed the replacement paper had not existed when the entries were supposedly written. Felix objected that paper could be stored for months before purchase. Elinor turned to the watermark. The mark belongs to a press installed this spring. The stationer's affidavit was read aloud. A creditor who had defended Felix minutes earlier removed his spectacles and examined the page himself. Elinor then placed the Westbridge delivery certificate beside the stable book and Eastgate repair account. She demonstrated that 3 loaded wagons could not have entered through a gate chained shut for repairs. No Greyhaven horses had been fed. No unloading labour had been paid. No toll house had recorded the passage. Mr. Sayer admitted accepting money to certify a shipment he had never seen. He named Pike as the intermediary and Felix as the source of the written token list. Felix attacked his credibility. You confess to bribery only after Westbridge threatens your position. Mr. Sayer looked ashamed, but did not retreat. I confess because Lady Elinor showed me that my lie would cost families their homes. The tenants at the rear began murmuring. Felix turned toward them. Those families will lose far more if creditors abandon Greyhaven because of this performance. Elinor closed the warehouse ledger. The creditors were never meant to abandon Greyhaven. She placed 3 bank drafts in a row. They were meant to seize it. The first draft paid Greyhaven for grain that had not moved. The second paid false carriage expenses to Mordaunt Commercial Holdings. The third pledged the same grain to a Newcastle bank. A solicitor read the company registration. The controlling shares belonged to a trust administered by Felix's brother-in-law. The trust had also purchased the first option on Greyhaven's riverlands. Felix's motive now sat in front of the room as clearly as the brass token. He had created the shortage, accelerated the debt, and positioned his own company to profit from foreclosure. Lord Ashcombe gripped the edge of the table. "You told me the sale was our only protection." "It was," Felix said. "For whom?" Elinor asked. He turned on her. "For this family, until you carried private records to our enemy." Gabriel stepped forward only when the presiding trustee addressed him. "Did Lady Elinor offer you Greyhaven information in exchange for protection or marriage?" "No." "Did she ask you to purchase the Riverlands?" "She prevented me from doing so." A stronger murmur crossed the hall. Gabriel continued without looking away from the trustees. "I intended to secure those lands when Greyhaven defaulted. Lady Elinor refused my assistance because it would have preserved the tenants only until ownership changed. I withdrew my purchase right and advanced the wages without a lien because her judgment was correct." He paused. "She warned me before the records were altered further. I delayed because I saw Tristan Harrow's enemy, before I saw the woman who understood the danger. That failure was mine." He stepped back before anyone could mistake his admission for the centre of the hearing. Elinor looked toward the tenants. "For 12 years. The wage reserve, emergency grain, and debt schedule were described as the judgment of men who rarely opened the books. When the system worked, my name was absent. When it failed after I left, my absence was called sabotage." She turned to her father. "You told this room I merely copied figures." Lord Ashcombe's face had lost all colour. Elinor pointed to the reserve schedules, Merchant Extension, and wage transfers bearing her working codes. "Those figures kept your estate solvent." She faced Tristan. "You called my memory an imagined attachment." She opened the ledger to the instruction written after his accident. "Yet 5 days after, you claimed to have forgotten me. You ordered my settlement calculations transferred into Lydia's account." Tristan rose so quickly that his chair struck the floor. Felix wrote that instruction, then explained the mark beneath it. The private downward stroke and 2 narrow dots were visible from the trustees' table. Tristan looked at the symbol he had used in the ballroom. Felix moved toward the ledger. Gabriel's solicitor blocked him. Tristan recovered enough to speak. "A copied mark proves nothing." "I agree," Elinor said. His surprise revealed that he had expected desperation rather than agreement. "A mark can be copied. A ledger can be altered. A witness can be frightened. That is why no single object decides this hearing." She lifted the dispatch register copied by Mr. Packer. "Bell." The original order travelled through an Ashcombe courier. The courier testified that you dismissed the footman, sealed the folio yourself, and placed it in his hand. Tristan looked toward the witness seats. The courier stood. He described the room, the hour, the green sealing wax, and the words Tristan had spoken before sending him away. Tristan denied it. Elinor did not argue. She placed a sealed packet at the centre of the trustees' table. This contains the original folio recovered from the private dispatch box of Mordaunt Commercial Holdings. Felix's composure finally broke. That box was taken illegally. No one had told him where the folio had been found. The presiding trustee stared at him. Elinor held his gaze. "You testified that folio 43 never existed." Felix looked at the sealed packet and understood the trap too late. Only a man who knew the missing page was inside could object to the place from which it had been recovered. The presiding trustee ordered the sealed packet opened before 3 witnesses. Inside lay folio 43. its lower edge still marked by the cut thread from Greyhaven's dispatch book. The Ashcombe courier identified the green wax he had seen Tristan press over the fold. Mr. Bell matched the page number to the copied register hidden beneath his hat. A bank clerk confirmed that the figures on the folio had been entered into Lydia's dowry account the following morning. The instruction carried Tristan's handwriting, his private mark, and a correction written in the same brown ink found in the pen case beside his bed after the accident. Tristan looked from the page to Elinor. For the first time since the ballroom, he did not pretend she was a stranger. "I believed the transfer would save Greyhaven," he said. The confession came quietly, without the dignity he had tried to preserve through every lie. "You believed Lydia's dowry would arrive faster if you married her." Elinor replied, "I was told the creditors would wait. Felix told you what you wished to hear. I did not know he meant to seize the estate." "You knew he meant to seize my settlement." Tristan lowered his eyes. The trustees questioned him until the entire arrangement became clear. His investments had failed months before the accident. Elinor's proposed marriage settlement would have required independent review of every major withdrawal. Lydia's dowry could be transferred with fewer protections because Lord Ashcombe had already signed broad authority into the draft. Felix suggested that a temporary loss of memory would allow Tristan to change brides without admitting financial desperation or public betrayal. Tristan agreed. He staged the carriage accident, bribed the physician to describe selective confusion, and let Elinor's family call her unstable. He told himself the deception would last only until Greyhaven recovered. Felix used that deception to move money, pledge the same grain twice, and position Mordaunt Commercial Holdings to purchase the Riverlands after default. The presiding trustee turned to Felix. "You concealed fraud inside the Duke's dishonesty." Felix's face had gone grey. "I acted to preserve assets abandoned by incompetent owners. You created the failure from which you intended to profit," Elinor said. Two constables moved to either side of him. Felix looked toward Tristan for protection. Tristan remained seated. The man who had once controlled every letter, K, and account in Greyhaven left the hall under arrest for forgery, effraud, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy to obtain property through false debt. Mr. Pike was found 2 days later at a coaching inn with Greyhaven money sewn into his coat. The physician returned part of Tristan's payment and gave a sworn statement to avoid prosecution as a principal conspirator. The magistrate ordered the remaining company books seized before Felix's relatives could remove them. The trustees suspended Tristan from every financial decision involving Greyhaven. His title remained his, but the estate no longer obeyed his signature alone. The Grain Consortium removed him from its board. The newspapers that had described Elinor as a jealous woman printed the hearing's findings beneath her full name. Lord Ashcombe rose before the tenants and creditors had begun to leave. Elinor expected another request for family silence. Instead, her father faced the room. "My daughter did not copy my accounts," he said. "She managed them." His voice shook, but he continued. "I accepted praise for work I could not perform. And when she named the truth, I protected my comfort by questioning hers." He turned toward Elinor. "I cannot repair that by calling you dutiful now." "No," she said. "You cannot." He bowed his head and accepted the answer. Lydia gave a complete statement regarding the conversation she had overheard before the engagement announcement. The trustees recovered the unused portion of her dowry and placed it beyond Tristan's control. She ended the engagement publicly and moved to the home of an older cousin who offered safety without asking her to deny what she had done. Elinor did not forgive her immediately. She also did not punish Lydia by sending her back to the man who had used them both. The first wages were released before sunset. The termination notices were withdrawn in the same hall where Felix had expected to divide the tenant's land. Gabriel's advance remained without lien. Purchase option, or claim upon the river road. When a creditor asked why Westbridge had surrendered such a profitable advantage, Gabriel answered, before the entire assembly, because profit gained through another man's fraud would still make me its beneficiary. He then placed his signed withdrawal beside the brass token. The trustees presented Elinor with a proposed appointment as temporary comptroller. She read every line before responding. Temporary authority disappears when powerful men feel safe again, she said. The room waited. She crossed out the first clause and wrote her own conditions beneath it. Her position would be independent of Ashcombe, Greyhaven, and Westbridge. Her salary would be paid from the tenant trust before household expenses. No reserve grain could be sold without her signature. Every rent roll, bunk draft, warehouse pledge, and land contract would remain open to her inspection. She could appoint 2 clerks, publish an annual account, and resign without surrendering her methods, wages, or professional reputation. 2 elected tenant representatives would hold seats beside the estate trustees. Tristan read the document last. You would give tenants authority over Greyhaven property. I would give people endangered by its decisions a voice in them. He looked at the trustees, the creditors, and the families gathered beneath his ancestors' portraits. Then he signed. Gabriel signed only as guarantor of the wage advance and relinquished every additional claim. No one placed a ring on Elinor's hand. No one changed her name. No one announced that marriage had made her valuable. The hall waited for her signature because the new system could not proceed without her consent. Elinor signed and closed the red-spined ledger. 6 months later, the winter reserve stood full. Every wage account was current, and the first public audit carried Lady Elinor Vale's name on its cover. She kept the Bath contract in her private desk. The trust had allowed her to decline the position without closing the door, and knowing another life remained possible made every choice at Ashcombe truly hers. Gabriel visited only when business required it until she invited him to remain for supper. He never asked whether she had forgotten Tristan. He asked whether the Western farms needed another drainage loan and listened when she explained why they did not. One evening, he placed a marriage settlement beside the old brass token. The document protected her salary, office, property, residence, and right to continue using her own name in every professional record. You may refuse this and lose nothing, he said. Elinor read the final page. You would accept a wife who could overrule you in 3 estates. I would accept the woman who already has. She looked at the man who had once mistaken caution for wisdom and possession for protection. He had admitted the harm, surrendered the advantage, and left the door open when she chose to walk away. Elinor signed the settlement before she accepted his hand. Years earlier, Tristan had stood in a ballroom and pretended not to know who she was. Now an entire estate knew exactly whose judgment had kept it standing. Elinor chose Gabriel, not because he rescued her, and not because his title raised her above those who had dismissed her. She chose him because he had learned to stand beside her without taking the place she had earned. If Elinor's choice stayed with you, subscribe for more historical romances about women who were underestimated until the world had to recognize what they had built.